As I've mentioned, I cannot support ruling out a possible site, so I will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, Councillor Strapp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we got to back up for a second here and actually frame this discussion again for what it actually is. We're getting tunnel vision here. Let's go back to why we're here. Who made this bed that we're lying in right now? Why is this council talking about this? Is it because of a single decision by the Limestone District School Board to close 2 schools, 2 community schools? That's what created the community outrage, and that's what's creating all of these heated feelings that we're all feeling here tonight, including myself. You know, as Mr. Mayor pointed out, the students here gave a great presentation.
Had to It happened in the last council by a 7-6 vote. It cost us $53,000. Achieved was a kind of no action report, no action recommended. Under the Municipal Act, we always have the power. If 2 people in this council feel that I did something wrong, and it may be Kevin George, no, and you can always bring a motion forward to council and request under the Municipal Act that an investigation be sought. And all it takes is a majority of council to say yes to that, and then we go through the process. But to spend money on a retainer for something that we've only done in recent memory, has only happened once with no resolve coming out of it, I think would be a foolish expenditure. And so I hope people can vote yes for this motion, vote no for an integrity commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion. I'd just like to say I'm supporting it on an intellectual level because I agree with the reasons stated just now. It's unnecessary, but also it's unnecessary for me on an emotional level because I feel like I've gotten to know you guys around the horseshoe here in the last 3 months to the point where you know, hiring a permanent integrity commissioner is just not what you do amongst friends. Like you're working together and you're going to trust each other here, you know. I know things are going to get a little heated. We see that time and again, but we've shown already that, you know, we all swore an oath, and we swore it sincerely, and that's good enough to me. That your word is good enough to me, and I know that if there is, as Deputy Mayor said, if there's any issues, we can work through it together. Thank you.
Thank you. That gave me the warm and fuzzies right there. That was great. Anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I have to sit farther back now. I think I'll support this motion, but I do it hesitantly. I think it's important that, jokes aside, that we have a pretty steep responsibility, and the reason integrity commissioners have come up across the province and other cities is that we're seeking transparency, openness, third-party oversight, independent observers. Those kinds of things are what cities and their people are asking for. And so I'm supporting this motion so that on good faith that this council will support future motions that help us be more transparent and open with our citizens, so that we can be clear about what's happening around the table, what's guiding our discussions, and make sure that our citizens are involved. And those are the kind of policies that our city should be built on, instead of having what some might call a watchdog. We should have a true set of policies that we rely on for transparency and openness and accountability. And I think that's what we owe to each other if we decide not to go, if we decide to vote against having an integrity commissioner. So I will be supporting this motion as well.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'd just like to echo the words of Councillor Allen there, and part of the reasoning for that is just simple numbers. Looking at $53,000 a year times 4, you're up into a couple $100,000, and that was called upon from that. So, I mean, from a simple fiscal evaluation of the situation, looking at it, even if in 4 years we needed to call and create an issue, or there was an issue that happened, and that needed to be called once, you're still not really fiscally making a lot of sense with that. So with that in mind, I'm going to be supporting this motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I will, and I recognize you.
Great, thank you. Just to respond to a comment that had made earlier about the report that came back from the previous Integrity Commissioner, there actually was an action item that was recommended out of that. And that action item was to go back and to have another look at our code of conduct and change it, tighten it up, make some recommendations so that council would work better. And I think it's important to make this case that the whole idea of having an integrity commissioner on retainer was not so that they could investigate us. It was basically to help us to get the code of conduct the way that it should be. That was the whole idea. Now, I understand that seems to have been lost in the conversation, and we're talking about only an investigator, and because Bill 8 has just passed at the provincial level and clearly says that, you know what, the Ontario Ombudsman is more than happy to step in and to investigate something if we're not going to deal with it ourselves. So I appreciate Councillor Stroud's comments. My sense is that this is a council that will function well together. We're going to have our disagreements, but clearly, you know, there's not going to be, I don't think, an animosity on a personal level. I'm very happy to see that. That being said, understand that the whole idea of the Integrity Commissioner was to do something very different from that. And that was basically just to make us function better, to educate us more about if we had potential pecuniary interests, for example, so that we could avoid any problems down the road, more to be proactive. So it's pretty clear the way the winds are blowing here. I think that, you know, we've decided we don't want an investigator, we don't want an integrity commissioner on retainer, and so I'm happy to support that. But just to understand that there could be an opportunity for us moving forward to actually work on our code of conduct, to be more proactive, just to make sure that we never have to deal with a problem later on, that we can deal with it, be proactive about it, so it doesn't blow up later on. So thank you very much. May I have the chair back?
Yes, you may.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody else that has not spoken that wishes to speak? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor, you may speak last.
Yes, and just very quickly, I appreciate the comments about transparency and accountability. I appreciate the comments about needing to improve our code of conduct and take another look at that. Those are policies. We don't need an integrity commissioner to improve our policies. And so I would embrace any of those, any motions that come forward to open up, to have more open government, to have more transparency, to ensure more accountability, to improve on our code of conduct. We don't need an external person to tell us how to do that. I think collectively we can work to those ends. So, thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will call the vote. Please vote. And that carries unanimously. Motion number 3. Moved by Councillor Candon, seconded by Councillor George. Whereas the City of Kingston Council approved a 10-year housing and homelessness plan in 2013, whereas the City of Kingston Council, with advice from its Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee, issued and request for proposals for the provision of services included in the 10-year housing and homelessness plan in 2014, whereas not-for-profit organizations spent time and money to submit detailed proposals in response to the requests for proposals, and in some cases restructured their organizations and services in order to meet the goals and objectives of the City of Kingston's 10-year housing and homelessness plan, whereas the City of Kingston Council is approving its 2015 operational budget, which includes additional funding in the amount of $155,000 to Dawn House Shelter without a formal proposal or detailed information on the use of these public funds. Therefore be it resolved that Council requires Dawn House Shelter to submit a detailed operational and financial plan subject to staff review and report to Council before any of the additional $155,000 is provided, and that staff be directed to report back to Council with information on the 10-year housing and homelessness plan goals and objectives and the request for proposal process that was followed to establish the plan. Councillor Candon, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. At first glance, this may seem as though it could be a controversial motion, so I made some notes outlining exactly where it's coming from and what the purpose of the motion is. Essentially, it's a motion for accountability and transparency. It's also an acknowledgement of other social agencies that have not received funding and had to close their doors. Dawn House provides good services to the community. I'm not taking exception to Dawn House, rather I'm pointing out a missing component to a previous motion that was lacking a justification of funds. Understanding where money is going is absolutely paramount for maintaining our integrity and relationship with taxpayers. I hope that in the future we put ourselves in a position where we can do our due diligence, follow standard procedure, and treat all nonprofit organizations equally. This is not a motion of reconsideration, it's simply asking Dawn House. You can
made this motion. We perhaps did not do all of our proper as well. That they are going to provide that, so I'm very happy to support this. I would just, as presented, the motion rounds the money figure to the nearest 1,000. I would like to the new motion to say that any references to the 155,000 in paragraphs 4 and 5 be amended to 155,455. And the second minor adjustment, which I spoke with Councillor Candon about, is to amend paragraph 5 by deleting words "subject to staff review and report to council," and to be replaced with the words "so as to facilitate options to keep Dawn House open beyond 2015.
So I'm just going to stop you there. I think we're going to deal with these motions to amend separately.
Okay.
So for the first motion to amend, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Osanek. So Councillor McLaren, you have the floor. I'm going to ask, you may speak to the first motion to amend. We'll deal with that. We'll call move to amend.
We really need to get a perspective on this instead of doing it in an ad hoc manner. We're doing it for now, but I don't want to continue to direct staff in a direction that really isn't compatible with what we've been doing for the past couple of years, especially since staff or council hasn't seen the whole plan and understands the context. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for those words, Councillor Shallon. It was well put. Yeah, I find this extremely bizarre. I mean, coming from a councillor who claims to be an economist, we're dealing with taxpayers' dollars. We are responsible for those. The right place to make that decision is not with external agencies, but with in-house, right here. So I definitely will not be supporting this. I think this is one of the most bizarre things I've seen in a long time. When we're talking that kind of money, that is something that our staff, they need to be reporting out to us. And so I'm going to continue to support the original wording in the motion. I think this is totally out of line.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment? Councillor McLaren, you can speak last. Councillor Stroud.
This will be quick. I actually agree with pretty much what everyone's been saying on both sides of this amendment, but I'm going to support the amendment because my understanding is that staff will, everything that we do is direction to staff, and this financial and operational plan that I thought it redundant to put in subject to staff review into the actual motion, and that's why I support the amendment to change the wording. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Candon.
I just want to point out,
So this is on the motion to amend? Yeah.
I just want to clarify, again, as I put forward, it's about accountability, transparency, and holding all nonprofits at the same bar, not having to make some jump through some hoops and not others. Commissioner Hurdle made it very clear that that's standard procedure, and the only reason I put this forward is essentially to gain credibility in the sense that we treat all nonprofits fairly. It's very clear that the original motion does not need to be amended as a result of that, and for that reason, I will not be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren, you can speak last.
Thank you. I'd just like to draw your attention that we are creating a funding loophole here. The original motion called for a report to be returned to council in the third quarter. In June, and there will be a few months there in which there will be no funding, in which we could be destroying Dawn House if the report takes too long, and that's part of the reason that we wanted to move this the way I had, because if we don't do that, there's a possibility that the report could be delayed beyond the funding envelope or window that they have. They're forced to close, and then it becomes more expensive or impossible to open up again. And in the meantime, we'll have several vulnerable women and their children on the street. So in order to close that gap, that funding gap between the end of June and the third quarter, I suggest that we actually pass this, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will call the question on the motion to amend. Please vote. And that loses 2-10. Councillor McLaren, you still have the floor. Do you wish to speak to the motion as not amended? You have 4 minutes left on the clock if there's anything else you want to say.
Great. So as I said earlier, I still support this. I would like to see transparency, accountability, and I hope that we are moving Dawn House to fit in with our housing and homelessness plan. They had mentioned that they are dealing with the hardest cases of homeless people, of women, and as such, they are a worthy charity to support, a worthy shelter. And I hope that we can actually keep them open and that we have not accidentally set up trap for them or delivered them to the wolves by this funding gap that may have appeared. And I encourage you all to actually support this because I believe that it will be done, and I hope that staff will help them to find a way to continue on as we had originally voted in the budget session. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the motion as amended with the First Amendment? So just with that new dollar figure? Seeing none, Councillor Candon, you have the right to speak last if you'd like, or we can call the vote. Okay. So please vote the motion as amended. And that carries. For the next motion, Deputy Mayor, I'll ask if you would take the chair.
I will, and I recognize you. Moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Bohm. Whereas members of council will be asked to... at the upcoming strategic planning session to establish priorities for future capital projects, and whereas information regarding the financial parameters of potential future capital projects is important to have in advance in order to assist in establishing these priorities, and whereas at the 2015 budget sessions, Council received the 15-year capital expenditure forecast. Therefore, be it resolved that the CAO be requested to bring forward an information report to the March 3rd, 2015 Council meeting with information about the shorter-term financial parameters of projects currently forecasted in the 15-year capital plan, including the airport expansion project, the third crossing, the Wellington Street extension, north and south segments, and other infrastructure projects. And I return the chair to you, and you have 5 minutes.
Actually, I think I'll ask you to keep the chair, and you can time me, and I'll make sure that
I will do so.
Well under 5 minutes. Thank you. Just a couple of brief comments. I just want to make it clear to everyone that this motion is not in any way suggesting what projects we should prioritize. That's going to be something that Council's going to need to decide in our strategic planning sessions at the end of March. This is simply to ask staff for information related to projects that have been in discussion in the past. These are projects that may or may not be supported, may or may not be prioritized, but I think it's important to make that decision one way or the other, that we need to know exactly what the ballpark figures are. What dollar figures are we looking at with some of the infrastructure projects that have already been put forward? This also doesn't preclude other projects from coming forward as well, but I think at the end of the day, if we're going to prioritize properly, we need to know exactly what the dollar figures are that are going to be attached to all of these things. So if we can have that information at our March 3rd meeting, then that's going to prepare us, I think, to go in and to make an educated decision about what we will and will not prioritize as a council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Stroud.
I have a question for staff. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Neal. If for some strange reason this motion does not pass, what would, just for my own understanding of the process, what would the CAO and senior staff be reporting before we get into strategic planning? Like what? How does this specify? How does this change the course of the reports?
Yes, I recognize staff.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, it was intended all along that, I think a date was set for mid-February. I think it was February the 18th, if I recall, where we were going to have a session with council to discuss a process and to discuss items would preclude having that meeting, not having to have that meeting, and would better prepare council for its upcoming strategic priority sessions. And so we can do it, and I think it'll set some context for this council.
Thank you, Commissioner Leger.
Okay, so different method of providing information that we need to make our strategic planning sessions.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, you have unanimous support, and I pass the chair back to you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So we have no other motions. Do we have any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none. Minutes?
Moved by Councillor Turner, second by Councillor Bohm, that the minutes of City Council meeting number 2015-5 held Tuesday, January 27th, 2015 be confirmed.
Please vote. And that carries. Tabling of documents, we have a number of communications that are noted. Is there any other business? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Neal.
Just very quickly, I know that, and I think I've heard a partial answer to the question I'm about to ask, but I did send CAO Hunt an email. I was curious about the reduction in our strategic planning sessions. I think anybody from our previous council would say that in 2011, that was an excellent opportunity to kind of anchor our policies over the next 4 years. And I was a little concerned when I first saw a reduction in those meetings because they give everybody on council, particularly new councillors, an opportunity to be fully engaged in setting priorities.
Commissioner Leger, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to indicate that I think by providing the information in CAO Hunt's report on March 3rd, what that'll do is it'll better position you, and you'll have more time actually at the end of March in your 3 days to undertake your strategic priority setting sessions.
Thank you, and I'll hold you to that. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add also that there will be a third session that will be added after the March 30th, March 31st dates. That will be later on in April. So it is actually going to follow quite closely we had 4 years ago.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I will ask for bylaws.
Your Worship, we're going to be separating a number of bylaws this evening, so you'll see people going up and down, so Mr. Arjun will manage that process.
So the first set of bylaws are for the conflict that Councillor Bohm declared for the UK bylaws for the budget. Candon, second by Councillor Turner. Ballots 2, 3, and 4 be given their first and second reading.
Please vote. That carries.
This is moved by Councillor Stroud, second by Councillor Osanek, that clause 11.34 of bylaw 2010-1 be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaws 2, 3, and 4 3 readings. So it's moved by Councillor Shell, second by Councillor George, that bylaws 2, 3, and 4 be given their third reading.
Please vote. And that carries.
So now we'll do the sixth bylaw, which is the municipal operating budget bylaw. So Councillors Holland and Bohm have declared pecuniaries to this bylaw. So it's moved by Councillor Cannon, second by Councillor Turner, that bylaw 6 be given its first and second reading.
Please vote. That carries.
It's moved by Councillor Stroud, second by Councillor Osanek, that clause 11.34 of bylaw 2010-1 be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaw 6 3 readings.
Please vote. carries.
The bylaw, that's moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor George, that bylaw 6 be given its third reading.
They called you in one motion too early. Please vote. Still 2 people to vote. That carries.
So it's moved by Councillor Camden, seconded by Councillor Turner, that bylaws 1, 5, 7 to 9 be given their first and second reading.
Please vote. That carries.
Moved by Councillor Stroud, second by Councillor Osanik, that clause 11.34 of bylaw number 2010-1 be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaw 5 being what? Yeah, 5, 3 readings. It's fine.
Please vote.
That's the capital.
Still 1 person to vote. That carries.
Let's move by Councillor Shell, second by Councillor George, that bylaws 1, 5, 7 through 9 be given their third reading.
Please vote. That carries. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Neal, second by Councillor Allen. Please vote. That carries. Thank you. We are adjourned.